Dan Quinn is the new coach of the Commanders after 3 years at the helm of the Cowboys defense, which was consistently one of the best units in the league last 2 years. Top 5 scoring defense, number 1 pressure rate, and thrived on defensive touchdowns. Brew, Coach Mangini is here, but Brew, we'll start with you. How much will the Cowboys miss Dan Quinn?
Well, Quinn was great. I mean, remember what the defense was like before he got there? Yep. It was terrible. Mike Nolan was the DC. They were like near the bottom of the league. Quinn turns around immediately, but they might hire, one of the favorites is Joe Witt Jr., who's been on their staff with Quinn. So he was in Atlanta with Mike Quinn, then went to Dallas. Dan Quinn.
Yep.
Then went to Dallas with Quinn a few years ago. So if it's him, I like the continuity. They won't change up much. Nolan had them running a defense that wasn't even built for their personnel. Mike is still going to be there. The rest of the players defensively, for the most part, are still going to be there. So, Coach, I think they'll be good. I think they'll be fine without Quinn, assuming they bring in this guy who does it Quinn's way, may have a different personality, but you're not going to be changing the defense completely.
Well, the personality is a big component of it, and I think they're going to miss him a lot. And being a former head coach, you can turn that side of the ball over. So that frees up Mike McCarthy to really focus on the offense. And Dan was able to handle problems. Dan was able to relate to guys in different ways, to rally the troops in different ways. He was my defensive line coach in New York. And the thing that I always loved about him is that I didn't ever have to address things with his unit. So he could always take care of those things. They were always extremely well coached. They played hard. They were well prepared. So the X and O part is one element of it, and you may get continuity with another coordinator. But the value that he brings from a stabilizing perspective and from giving Mike McCarthy the freedom to really just focus on the offense is huge.
Yeah, I think it's a massive blow for Dallas, and despite the fact that I think it's a big blow for Dallas and I have a lot of respect for Dan Quinn, I don't understand it for Washington. So, and it is not the idea that you can only hire offensive-minded head coaches. I think we've seen a lot of defensive-minded head coaches have a lot of success. Obviously, Belichick was, but he's not the only one. Tomlin has. Harbaugh was special teams coach. But Washington's about to draft a quarterback at number 2. And so the opportunity to marry that quarterback's growth with an offensive head coach that can be there if everything works out for the next decade, whether it be you have to pay a ton of money for Ben Johnson, you had Eric Bieniemy in-house, that to me from Washington's perspective would have made the most sense. And then from Dallas's perspective, you lose him in the division where at the very least he is going to, you're going to have to deal with him knowing your tendencies twice a year. And Brew's right that if you remember now, one of the things that happened when they got Dan Quinn, it's also when they drafted Micah, and so that you got a transcendent talent to help the defense. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of discussion about how Dallas's defense it wasn't just what they were running, but it was that the players didn't seem to understand what they were supposed to be running. And Quinn settled that all down, and so it's a real loss. And as I said yesterday, one of my resolutions for 2024 is to take coordinating seriously, to not overlook, you know what I mean, that when a team loses its coordinator, be like, oh, they're just going to be fine, they're going to replace it.
Well, just to respond to what you said, with the head coaching job, you don't necessarily want an offensive guy or a defensive guy, you want a head coach. And the value in hiring a defensive head coach is typically they're willing to draft a lot more on the other side of the ball. Because you think I can fix the problems with lower-level draft picks, with free agents. If my offense coordinator needs, the first round, the second round, the third round, you're willing to do that
Houston,
because you feel so much more confident knowing that you can fix the problems on your side of the ball. You want to push those resources to the other side of the ball, and that should allow them to support the quarterback if they go get him.
Not so with Bill Belichick. We kept drafting defense. That's okay, though. Like he said, the defense is awesome.
Quite a few tight ends drafted.
Yeah, that's fair. Coach, you loved it?
I hated it. I hated every part of it, and I think it's completely disingenuous. And I want to take you on a quick Micah Parsons journey. Okay, so let's go look at training camp, what he said in training camp, if we can bring that up. He talked about the team being in the level of the Legion of Doom, of Ray Lewis's Ravens. That's how talented this Dallas defense was. That's all the parts they had. Okay, let's fast forward now to after the San Francisco game. We have the same talent. We have the same standard as them. Okay, so now we're in the middle of the season. We got the same talent as the team that's in the Super Bowl. Okay, let's see what one of the ex-teammates said about him. Okay, we don't have linebackers. Guess what, Micah? You were supposed to be a linebacker. What does he say? He doesn't want to play linebacker because there's a lot involved in it. It's harder. It's not rushing the passer. So there's a part that's missing that you could easily fill. And then let's go to this final one here. Okay, I don't think I could have done anything more to try to win that game. I have no regrets about how I performed or what I put into the game. Thanks for your one tackle. You gave up 40 points. You couldn't have done any more. You're right. You're the defensive player of the year. You're 24. You're setting the league on fire. But you couldn't have done any more in that game than that one tackle that you got. So, congratulations. I hope they get the parts too, Micah. I hope they get the parts too.
So, all right, that was
Well
great,
done,
Coach. And
yes.
you guys know I don't like to say this. I totally agree with that.
Oh, man.
Say it loud and say it proud.
I hate this from Micah. And to me, it's nonsense. Because whatever you think of the Cowboys' talent ceiling, it was not getting whacked at home by the 7th seed. So it would be if they had played the Niners in the conference championship game and the Niners put it to them a second time. Again, I don't think this would be the right necessarily public comments. But if the answer is, you know what? They beat us every year in the playoffs. We don't have the horses. They have better personnel than us. So be it, even if he's not the best messenger for it. You lost to the youngest team, in the playoffs in 50 years? Your defense, I understand they scored 48, but 7 was a pick 6. So the defense allowed 41. Like, it's ridiculous. And nobody looks at the Cowboys as a team just don't have enough good players.
Right.
Like, that's, again, maybe not to win the Super Bowl, but you didn't get even halfway to the end of the journey. And so I just think it's a cop-out. And Coach is right. It's a cop-out because the NFC Championship game, Brew, was his least production of any game all year. Now, I'm sure that he was being doubled and they schemed for him, but it was his worst game of the season from a production standpoint. So I didn't like it.
I agree with everything you guys said. I will say, though, I do think there are two things they need. All right, I think they need a meat eater at running back. Somebody if they could get Derrick Henry, I don't know if they can, but if you could get a guy like that, or, there's a lot of running backs that can do this, but a big running back that can pound the defense, take some of those hits, and then let Pollard do what he does, and Dak doesn't have to carry you like they wanted him to do this year. He was fine against the tomato cans and some of the good teams, but we saw what happened in the playoffs. Defensively, Coach, too, and maybe this is because Micah won't go to linebacker, but they need to get a little bigger. They're playing small and fast, and then some of the bigger, more physical teams can rough them up. So I think they need some size defensively. So I agree with you guys saying it doesn't sound right coming from him because all year he's saying we got enough. But these two areas I do think they need to fix.
And I think the other thing that goes into being great is accountability.
Yeah.
So if you want to be great, and he has the potential to be great, why don't you start with a little accountability, what he can do better? Why don't you lead that group in ways that justifies your talent instead of sitting around saying, oh, it's a scheme, it's the missing pieces, it's this. No. Well, it's what can you do differently to have a different result.
Well, that's the other thing. The other thing he said in the podcast was people were talking about him not playing linebacker as much. And he was like, he basically just put it on the coaches. He was like, I'm not calling the personnel packages. I'm not calling the scheme. We were out schemed. It was a lot.
Yeah, it's hard to call a package when a guy doesn't want to do it.
Well, but
you don't want to
but
do
even if that part is true, that Dan Quinn wasn't calling for those packages in that game, just your best player needs to be your most accountable player. He's their best player. And I don't think the Cowboys will do this, but if I'm Stephen Jones and Micah's agent is coming to me, which he will this offseason for the biggest contract for any defensive player in the history of football, I might play this podcast for him and be like, well, we could do that, but your client says we need more talent. So we can free up some money. Like, again, and I've defended Micah all year, but I thought this was a really bad look, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get more from the show and to check out clips from other shows on FS1.